Welcome to Pen and Poet. Intimate conversations and performances with poets, both page and stage, established and up and coming. A safe space where you can meet new artists, maybe gain an appreciation for the spoken and written word. This is poetry for the rest of us, the reachable, understandable, digestible poetry.
That night, Zapata washed my feet. Handlebar whiskers scratched the itch between my legs like myth.
On the days of our births, we breathe the dust of these memories, and it scours our flesh, smooths our skins, fills our lungs.
All the dead desire most is to live in our memory. All they desire most is to laugh and to dance.
I'm Rainey Mullen, and on the show today, Robin Reynolds. Robin is a writer, artist, and poet. She pays the bills while working at Sandia National Laboratories here in Albuquerque and curates Ink and Alchemy, a platform for artists to come together and share their work. And Robin, thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you for having me, Rainey.
How close was I about the Ink and Alchemy intro?
Meaning, is it correct?
Yeah.
It's correct.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, because I don't use it as often as I probably should. Yeah. So, and Robin was also a part of the same Rumble Room team that Ana Martinez, Zachary Gluckman, and myself were on and went to Southern Fried this last year. She has a collection of short stories called Cutting Your Losses on Amazon that can be found under her old name, but at least based on our conversation, you're going to hopefully be updating that soon with a new name.
Yes.
But I'll put links to it currently in the liner notes so everybody can go check it out if they so choose. And has a number of poems in the Rumble Room Volume 1 that Ana Martinez, Zach, and myself are in as well that I mentioned in episode 1. So the fun part, to get folks a little acquainted with you, I'm going to start you by asking you to do a poem. Your choice.
Okay, I'd love to. This one is called Dead Chickens.
One of my favorites.
Thank you. It's not normal to cry over an egg salad sandwich. I know this. 3 days ago, he called to say he was clean but hadn't eaten in 9 days. I'd heard from him maybe 5 times in the last quarter century, but I knew exactly who he was. You don't forget a thing like that. The day I met him, I was a screaming fucking maniac throwing all of my douchebag boyfriend's clothes down steep stairs into the street. I was 17, hadn't been home in months. He parked that piece of shit motorcycle and then, without a word, helped me pitch a 6-drawer dresser to splinter in the green grass. Guns N' Roses raged from the neighbor's porch. Suddenly it was all rain in my face, wind in my hair. Strobe lights down there. Come on, baby, give it to me good. Cocaine, fat joints, fists, and I'm so sorry. You know I love you, but we should put some ice on that. It's just you and me. Except when it's me and her, me and whiskey, me out all night. Bruises, Band-Aids, motorcycles sliding on asphalt. Whirled by the balls and small, small town. 8-ball, stripper pole, black lights, shots of Jaeger before each shift, and all I wanted was for him to love me. And love me he did. Some people love with fists and fat lips, and now it was crack cocaine, sharp fear in the night, that glass table and so many knives on the floor. I remember watching his tattoo as he cracked 5 eggs, each shell shattering itself again and again on the tips of his fingers. He wasn't wearing a shirt. I had red lipstick and cleavage, both a little too much in the bright light of the kitchen. We were still drunk with the power of youth. Didn't suspect the devastation to come. There was no way to see the son, the daughter waiting quietly beneath his skin. Only his stark beauty and the fact that I'd never before eaten egg salad, which explains why we two left the party, boiled water in a stranger's pot, and spent the next 5 years loving each other to pieces. Now those kids are older than he was then. Now it's been 23 years homeless. Meth, heroin, I can't fucking stop, and baby, please help me. Snow, ice, batteries from dumpsters, cardboard signs, dirty, dirty beard. Old man face and brain a clusterfuck of need and regret. 4 fingers, 2 toes gone, staph infection and no ride to the hospital. The stench of bridges burning to the ground. So yeah, I sent him money the other day because 9 days is a long time and your first love is an addiction worse than any drug. So when the hospital called to say that he'd stroked out, that he sure as fuck wasn't clean, never had been, that those 2 kids grown now are next of kin and could I ring 'em up on the phone? I just happened to be eating an egg salad sandwich and I couldn't help but cry over those 5 dead chickens.
Thank you. It's
You're
always one
welcome.
of my favorites of yours. And a couple of things on that one. One being that this is a poem that is in that Rumble Room book that I mentioned that will be in the liner notes. But if you're okay talking about it, this also happens to be probably one of the tougher ones, at least that I've heard you do, just because of, well, the content, but the gentleman in the poem kind of passed away shortly after. And if you're okay with that, chatting a little bit about, well, what brought you to write it in the first place, maybe not necessarily the aftermath.
Sure. Do you want me to just talk about it or do you have any specific questions?
I'm going to leave that totally in your floor because I know it's a tender subject to begin with. So
Okay, thank you. So as you recall, Rainey, I believe we were preparing to go to Louisville for the slam. And my ex-husband, who happens to be the father of my 2 kids, grown now, passed away on May 20th, 2017 from a drug overdose. I actually had part of this poem written probably for 2 years, trying to kind of grapple with just a lot of things that happened between he and my kids, a lot of disappointment and frustration. But the poem could not be finished. It sat there in just this unfinished form and frustrated me for a couple of years. And so then I found out that he died, and it brought it all to closure for me, and this poem came out of that. So
that's awesome. And I've never actually asked this as to how important the actual egg salad was, or if it was just something to kind of open and close it, kind of fun.
That story is true. I did meet him at a party. He did make me an egg salad sandwich. And so, we joked a lot about that we fell in love over an egg salad sandwich. So I guess it really is an important point, oddly.
Yeah. It's a great bookend for that one, for sure.
And, it's odd. This is about emotions, which I guess really are the driving force behind poetry, right? So this is probably an appropriate conversation. Despite the fact that he was homeless for all of my children's lives, really, he was very important to me. So I struggled with that for a long time because he let me down a lot, let them down a lot. And so working through this poem, and I think you and the slam team helped a lot too, it just helped me see that that's okay. It's okay to still love somebody, even if they let you down. And I'm sad to see him go, and I'm sad that this is what his life turned out to be. But I still feel like I supported him in the best way that I could.
And I have to say that in the short time that you and I have known each other, you've kind of taught me that exact same thing in terms of, because I know we've talked a lot about our pasts, and just your kind of ability to, or willingness to kind of see both sides, that you can love and care for somebody even though all of that negative stuff is still there. And I have to say that that's just your ability to do that has kind of helped me along my little path in recent years. But
I'm very glad to hear that. Thank you. I'm flattered by it, to tell you the truth, because I strive so much to be that kind of person, but I'm I'm never quite sure how successful I am. So
Well, at least with this guy you are.
thank you, Amy.
And so the kind of elephant in the room would be how we both started doing slam. Now, I know for most of the folks who would be listening, they've probably been into slam for a while and with poetry for a very long time. But you and I are rather new to this.
We are.
And we kind of started at the exact same time. So I was curious about kind of your journey, I guess. What got you pushed to do it? What got you to stay with it, at least so far?
Sure. So I think you recall that before we even ventured into slam, I was, I believe, the vice president of Southwest Writers. Is that how we met, Rainey?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
I thought
yes.
so. And so I was at that time really pushing myself to write novels. I have 3, kind of in different states of disarray and unfinishedness.
I've got too many of them as well.
Right. And so, it took me a while to really understand and accept that I work better in shorter forms. Short stories, I love. I think that I can just tell a better story in a shorter form. When I came to Albuquerque, I was really too busy to do a lot of writing for a while, but I have always been very interested in slam. And in fact, about a decade ago, I saw Damian Flores, I believe at
Really?
Anodyne. Yes, and I was the classic quintessential drunken fangirl because I had seen him do some poem, and he's fabulous. And so I wandered up to him drunkenly and said, I love slam. I love you. I don't know what I said. I blacked it out for my own mental stability. But since that time, I really watched a lot of slam and really wanted to do it. I can't remember how you and I decided to start on the same day. Do you?
The way I remember it was I had posted something on Facebook. I think Melanie and I went to one of the semifinals that they had at La Cumbre, and Hakeem Bellamy and Damien and Gigi and Mercedes and all of them were there performing. And I think I posted something on Facebook about how I really liked it and always thought about doing it, but never had the guts. And I think you messaged me back, and we both made a pact that the following month,
Yes.
so in October of 2015 now, we just showed up at the Tractor one, and I signed up for open mic, and you bit the bullet and put your name on the wrong list or the right list. And
That's funny. I do remember making a blood oath, and I'm glad that we have kept each other accountable to that because it's been fun, hasn't it?
it has.
And we've come a long way, I think, in a pretty short period of time.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into our time in the slam team that went to Louisville. Anna and I spaced it and never chatted about it on air. But yeah, that was probably my biggest growth. My biggest growth, however you want to say it. And we also kind of, we learned a lot of, I think, about each other and about ourselves.
Yes. 21 hours in a tiny little car. What kind of car is that? It's a tiny Chevy, small sports car.
Yes, I even made a poem and I put it in a poem. And
It's not meant for long road trips with 4
goodness.
loud poets.
Oh no, tiny, tiny little thing. And yeah, just that. Yeah, I have to say, and this doesn't need to go any further in the conversation, but one of the ones that's also in that book that I'll put in the liner notes, the Family Grimm one, that one had opened a floodgate for me. Like, we were piecing together notes and things on our little shared page, and almost verbatim some of the stuff that I had written ended up in there. And that's when I kind of figured out, when we got together and kind of read it aloud for the first time, I kind of fell in love with you guys. Kind of
likewise.
Kind of solidified all of that.
And that poem is it's about a touchy subject. really.
Yeah.
And it surprised me how common that experience is. Different types of sexual abuse, emotional abuse. And so I think that summer really opened up a floodgate for me as well, because that topic had been one that was probably driving a whole lot of my writing, my poetry, and I was not allowing myself to acknowledge it. So when we finally were speaking it out loud, and when 4 voices speak together, remember the power of that?
Yes,
I'm being in church, right?
I'm getting
Yes.
goosebumps right now.
And it is powerful. I felt like together we could talk about these hard topics and really work through them and just be strong together. And I still feel that way about you guys, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I also want to chat a little bit about your other art, because I did mention the ink and alchemy, and I kind of want you to chat a bit about it. But I know, like you've already said, you do short stories, you do poetry, you do kind of everything. And I'm kind of curious as to what kind of brings you to each one of those mediums, and why are you kind of all over the place where most folks kind of
Rainey,
sit somewhere?
I'm a hot fucking mess. No, just kidding. I do have a better reason than that. Let's see. So I am originally from Ohio, and as I remember my life there, until I was 34, I didn't create anything, I don't think. I hadn't been to college yet. I didn't consider myself smart enough to do poetry or art. And then I came to Albuquerque, and to me it was a magical, beautiful place. It still feels that way to me. The raw beauty of the mountains, and I think it was really the freedom of being away from the very conservative people that I lived with and around in Ohio. It had kind of always chapped my ass just a little bit. And so being in Albuquerque, I moved with my kids and my dog and a hamster named Oreo. The dog and the hamster are no longer with us, but thank God the kids still are. And it just felt like I could breathe deeply, if that makes sense. And so I started dabbling a little bit in writing and some visual art. At this point, the visual journaling that I do really is part of my writing. If you look at the pieces, there is poetry on the page, sometimes covered up. There are a lot of layers in my work, and sometimes I go through a lot of ugly phases in the art, which is hard, but I love that idea that you have to go through some ugly phases and some shitty things, and you have to kind of stumble a little bit, and then in the end, when you look back, all of those layers together are something beautiful or pleasing in some way. But I really don't try for conventional beauty in my art. It's more like the process, right?
Yeah.
And I get a lot of joy out of sort of grunginess and graffiti-like things, and so you can really see that, I think, in my artwork.
It's funny that you should mention the kind of building or going through the shitty phases, because in all honesty, I think that's something that shows up in most of your poems, both that one that you've already read. I think Juicy hits on that pretty hard as well, and now I'm forgetting the name of the other one that you've done pretty often.
If middle-aged women wrote slam poetry.
Yes. Kind of all have that same kind of coming from shitty, or and learning from the weird shitty. And you also mentioned that, coming to Albuquerque, I also am a transplant from Connecticut myself, and I've actually found it really tough not to write poetry being here in the Southwest about the Southwest, because I didn't want to be that guy who moves to the Southwest and writes all the stuff and then makes everybody come here. I didn't want to be...
You might as well just paint some landscapes while you're at it, and then some George O'Keeffe vaginas.
Exactly.
And we would be complete.
Exactly.
Well, so that is a theme for me, and I know that you know this, Rainey, but for For listeners, I will say that idea of going through things that aren't necessarily positive and turning them into something good is pivotal for me, because one of the big catalysts for me to move to Albuquerque was my sister's suicide. And I have felt some guilt over that, because moving to Albuquerque was the best thing I could have ever done for myself and my kids. It just took us out of a place that was rooted in poverty and drug addiction and dysfunction, and brought us here. Not that that doesn't exist here in Albuquerque, but it's not ours, right? We shook things up and perturbated things enough to change our lives. And so looking back, sometimes I think, God, I never would have I wouldn't have wished that event to happen to force this transformation in my life. But that's not the way life works, right? It just, you're on a trajectory and you kind of make the most of it. And so I've made my peace with that there are a lot of things that have contributed to who I am now. And I love the person that I am now. It took me a long time to get here, though. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you do. Yeah. I'm still working on that part myself. So then how about another one? Another poem? Yeah.
Sure.
Or it looks like you also brought your short story collection. So if you feel you want to share one of those instead.
Thank you. I think I will share a fairly new one. I believe you've heard it.
Yay.
It's called Bed Sheets. The light on our bed sheets is emissary of more. It hints at the way you will cry when your mother is buried, not from heartbreak, but at the way that you feel nothing, and then mourn for your own heart. Forged steel, smoothed granite, laid to rest so many years ago. The first time you almost killed your baby brother because you hit him so many times, and all you could see was blackness, a glorious spirograph of pain. The next day, you were late for 4th grade because your mother couldn't drive with so many tears in her eyes. She told me this story yesterday, your mother, regret a coyote loping slowly across the 40 years between then and now, mangy, flea-bitten, starved to tell someone, anyone, this shameful black truth that has been hiding in her mama heart all this time. I told her I was packing my boxes. Whispering, she tells me that her son is a beast, that she will never forget how flat your voice sounded when you answered her questions. I can't help it. I'm afraid of what's inside of me. She will not admit how many times you said these words over the years, but that she loves you still, always will, and that she'd hoped I'd quiet the roar. My own intuition has been telling me to run since the very first moment I sat across from you. I did not run, and now, 8 years later, this light is thick liquid, creeping golden and alive across your rising and falling chest, and it foreshadows the exact opposite of warm beacon, dripping life, electric salvation leading homeward. It pleads, rescue me from the dark. It speaks of how the gravedigger knocks at your door every single week, but goes away empty-handed, because you are trembling under the bed, blind with rage. Heartbreak, the way your mouth tastes like pennies for days, no matter how many times you floss and brush. How you have always known that tears taste like the ocean and sound exactly like fists landing hard on flesh. You are afraid of everything, most especially yourself, and rightly so. Do you remember that Scotch-filled night in which you told me that you'd never had kids because you were terrified that they'd turn out exactly like you? I do. And then the day that you said, why are you so upset? I've worked so hard to bring you to this place. Slowly. It sounded like strategy. I remember the hollow places around your eyes, the way that I felt suddenly cold and unsafe in my own home. I can see you standing there in our kitchen, haunted and terrified. Terrifying, your empty eyes, and so I am awake right now watching the light dance across our bed sheets, and I am left wondering if the difference between you and a serial killer or you and a sexual predator is simply fear. And I am thankful for that. Grateful that after all the posturing and bravado, all the anger and telling me what the fuck to do, that underneath it all, you are just a coward quaking with fear. A small boy afraid of what is inside. I am not the same anymore. I will not be hunted, and I will not stand in place while you pick me apart. So I am packing my suitcase and leaving.
Wow. I half remember that, but there are a couple of lines in there that kind of hit hard. I wish I had written them down. I get too into the poems, and I just close my eyes and don't write and take notes.
That's probably the very best way to listen to poetry, my friend.
Probably, but there was a comment in there about that the other person hadn't had children because they were afraid of the child turning out like them. And I have to say that that's kind of why we don't have kids, or at least one of the reasons. So
Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to be honest and say that I haven't read that poem in a couple of weeks, and when I got to that part I panicked a little inside because I remember we had a conversation about kids, and I thought that maybe this was a sensitive topic for you, but it was kind of too late. I was already in it, and so my apologies for that.
No, it is a sensitive subject, but as anybody who knows my poetry knows that I go there anyway. So no, it hit, but no, it's good. That's what I like about poetry, is it hurts sometimes, but it hurts so good.
We should break into song right now.
So I guess this would be a good time to chat about your style of poetry. And now, granted, I know mostly your slam stuff. I don't know much of your more traditional stuff. So I'm curious, because I do know one of your big influences is
Stephen Dobbins.
Yes, I keep forgetting, and I had to look over at the book. Stephen Dobbins. And so I know your style of writing, it's much more story form, kind of. So I'm curious, what if you have influences for your slam stuff, or how you kind of piece together things.
Sure. So I started reading poetry years ago back in Ohio. Actually, the readers can't see this, but I brought this to show you because I used to hide my poetry in this very conservative quilted book. And there's a lot of, like feminism, down with the patriarchy, fuck shit in that book that I would have never shared with people in Ohio. And I was reading very traditional poetry then. I would take my kids to the library, put them in the children's book section, and just sit on the dusty floors for hours and read poetry. Just books all around me. Awesome. And I loved it. Still love doing that. And so I love traditional poetry. But every time I sit down to write, it's not what comes out. And so I struggled with that for a while. I have bookshelves full of poetry, and I was concerned that mine wasn't coming out like anyone's that I could see. But I'm okay with that now. I kind of just let that voice come out. And the way that I write, you probably know because we've written together, is I kind of dump a bunch of stuff on the paper, and then I just keep editing, and I can feel that voice coming out. So I just try to respect that, I guess. And it is more of a story form. I don't ever write traditional rhyming poetry. I try. Every April, I drag myself through the broken glass of the different poetry forms. Mm-hmm. Yes. Because I feel like you want to give them a chance, and you really want to spread your wings. And I had convinced myself for a while that to be a true poet, a real poet, I would have to do these things. But as we discussed the other day, I just don't think I like writing traditional conservative poetry. I'm okay with that.
And I'm really glad that you mentioned that the other day. Kind of the reason why I started this podcast was because there are a lot of slam podcasts, and there are a lot of quote unquote traditional poetry podcasts, but none that kind of ran the gambit and kind of bridged the gap, I guess. And I struggled with the same thing. Like, I have found very few traditional poets that I've frankly been able to understand. And that's probably mostly due to the fact that I didn't read growing up. I was a late bloomer as well. I didn't go to college until I was in my mid-20s, and even then I struggled just because I don't think I cracked a book in high school. The first book I read was, when I was 24.
I'm surprised by that one because you seem like such a literary nerd, and I mean that in the best way possible. But also I'm going to challenge you on that because I've always been a reader, always, my whole life. And I still don't love poetry with obtuse, references to Roman gods that we've never heard of and crap like that. I do like poetry that I can read poetry that's a little more conservative and traditional than I can write. But if it's so highfalutin that I just don't know what they're talking about. I think I went through a phase where I tried to read that and even tried to convince my own damn self that I was liking it. And then I'm like lying in bed with this book, like, what the fuck are they talking about?
I actually started to do an online course, totally free course, because like Whitman and Dickinson, I've tried to read it, and I just yesterday listened or watched a whole 20-minute breakdown of one of Dickinson's poems, and I'm just like, I don't see what people get out of. I don't enjoy, I guess, pulling it apart word by word, but that's again probably because of my background, and that I don't have the background in poetry, and I keep trying to like it, but yeah, I'm finding it difficult still, for sure.
Well, I feel about poetry as I do about all art in any form, including visual now. And that is, I think it should be accessible to anyone who wants it. That's one of the things that Ink and Alchemy is about, really, because people do an analogous thing with visual art where they think they're not smart enough, talented enough, something to do visual art. And in fact, to me, it is about the process. I really think these creative things saved my life somehow. We've talked about this, and I'm not suicidal. I don't think I ever have been, but it pulled me through all these difficult periods of my life and made me a different person, and it still does. And so to me, this poetry and the creative art that I do, even if that's all they ever accomplish, that's freaking huge, right? So for people, other people, you, me, whoever, if they do art and it gives them that, some kind of solace inwardly or some knowledge about themselves that they didn't have before, to me, that's plenty, right? Even if you never sell a book or you never sell a piece of art.
Well said. So that kind of segues into, I kind of wanted to chat a little more extensively about Ink and Alchemy. So if you want to chat about kind of what made you create it and kind of what it actually is and kind of.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So Ink and Alchemy, I started it in a fear-based way because I really wanted to do art, but I didn't think that I could because it was probably back in 2009 or 10. I was very busy going to school. I had a job. I was raising 2 kids. And so at night I would just like furtively search the internet for art that I loved. And like poetry, it's not the landscapes or the appropriate art. It's the weird, abstract shit that sometimes other people will look at and just say, yeah, I don't get that.
I'm one of them.
I know. We've talked about this.
It's a shameful thing, but I'm one of them.
I still adore you. But that's the thing. People can like whatever poetry they want, whatever art they want. I personally just like bright colors and weird grungy stuff. So I started looking it up. I was doing a bunch of work, basically educating myself on what art I liked. To kind of put it together on a website and a Facebook page. And what started happening is people were emailing me. How did you start doing art? How did you start doing this poetry? Because I would put little snatches of my poetry on there too. And what I found is, this is what led me to my middle-aged white women poem. I found that there are a lot of people out there who say, I really wanted to do art. I wanted to do poetry, but I never did. And now I'm 40 years old or 50 years old, and I'm frustrated. And so it's to encourage people that however they get to some creative endeavor, whatever results from that, whether it's good or bad based on society standards, it doesn't matter. It's really about the process, and it's about trying to be a better person than you were the day before and trying to get to know yourself. And I know all of that sounds kind of corny and woo-woo, but I really believe in it. If you're not going to take care of yourself and, understand yourself, who is? I mean, our time here is short, so.
How many people are on there? Do you even know?
I don't know. On my Pinterest page, I have over 10,000 followers.
What?
Yeah. It's kind of crazy. So I've been building this thing though for about, 5, 6 something years. I get really busy, and so sometimes I don't put a lot of effort into it. Sometimes I do. But it kind of has a momentum of its own on different social media outlets. And what I'm hoping to do is just encourage people and kind of bring them together in a safe place. A lot of the people that didn't know each other from all over the world are now friends on Facebook, have little private groups where they do art on a weekly basis.
That's awesome.
I know. I feel just great about that. And sometimes I would think I would like to use it to showcase more of my work, but I really end up not doing that. I'm not sure why. So I think the time just isn't right. Maybe that's just not what it's about. But I'm hoping that later, maybe when my career slows down a little bit, I can develop it into something else.
Yeah, and it's funny because you do post your art pretty regularly on your Facebook page.
Yes.
But apparently don't share it much on Ink.
It's weird. Ink and Alchemy just became its own thing, and it never has felt about me. It just feels about other people. And I just showcase art. In fact, there's an artist, her name is Wendy McWilliams. You will hate her work, Rainey, but I love it. And this is an example of how this site works. I found her work, just loved it, started showcasing her, and I didn't realize that I was one of the first people that ever considered her sort of a real artist. Had no idea. And so she later emailed me. She's very successful now, not because of Ink and Alchemy, but she just happened to kind of go viral on some of her social media sites and just has really come into her own. But she said it was instrumental to her that Ink and Alchemy would feature her work like she was a real artist.
Wow.
And in my mind, she is a real artist, right? And so that's kind of what I've tried to do from the beginning is, just not worry about rank or notoriety or fame, and just, if I like art, whether it's some chick in her kitchen or some guy who sold 10,000, I just feature it on there and try to bring attention to art itself.
That's awesome. And I have to admit that the name of this podcast is quite directly stolen from Ink and Alchemy.
Is it?
Pen and Poet. Yeah.
Yes.
Almost verbatim. I had a list of a few names, and I gave them to Melanie to say which ones she hated and which ones were okay. And that was the one that made the cut. And that was, directly stolen from.
Well, you are most welcome to it. One of the things I did when I came here to Albuquerque was start school, and still incredulous about this. I got an undergrad in chemistry, and so that at the time I was really working hard on my undergrad, and it seemed like fucking magic that I would ever graduate. And I think that's how Ink and Alchemy came to be. And in fact, when I published this book, Cutting Your Losses, the publishing company that I formed for that, it was called More Ink, which I thought was kind of a good play on Ink and Alchemy.
I thought that was yours too.
It is mine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I just don't do as much with it anymore. It was focused more on writing. Do you remember that back a few years ago?
I do, because that one I was actually excited about, and then nobody posted, and then it just kind of withered.
You know what? We should revive it.
I agree.
We should.
I agree.
Yeah, let's do that.
Excellent. Let's do it.
Right after I fix my LinkedIn HR or URL.
Yeah. So then let's see. I guess we'll have one more from you, and then we'll kind of do our icebreaker poem.
Okay.
How's that?
Yeah, that sounds good. You know what? I think I'll do an oldie and a goodie.
Bring it.
Pick one. Do you want to hear love, or do you want to hear of middle-aged white women?
Let's do middle-aged.
Okay. My shoes make a satisfying clack when I walk. My car, still under warranty. I have a 401k and I'm not hungry right now. Okay, I'll admit it. I don't actually remember the last time I was really hungry. I'm a middle-aged white woman, and from the outside, it looks like I have my shit together, which makes me fade into the background sometimes. But that's not the whole story. I remember searching the floorboard of a Chevy Nova that hadn't run in months. I was looking for loose change so I could buy cheap beer and fuck an unemployed waiter that I didn't even like. I remember when one of my husbands got so angry that he put his fist right through the kitchen window, blood dripping down and freezing into the crunching snow. I remember the day my sister took the trouble to carry an old chair down 27 stairs into her damp basement. She tied 12 knots in the cord, and then she hung herself from the rafters. When I found her, her feet were pointing like a ballerina. I remember thinking that I was right thousands of times, but in reality being so wrong. I remember getting an abortion and doing shots of Jack afterwards. I remember ripping one marriage to shreds. My point is, this life is much more complicated than you think. It's painted over thickly with gray. There is so much shattering in every life. Vessels meant to hold come crashing to the ground. Windows not used so much to see out, but useful for keeping the predators at bay. They break too, the tinkling of glass waking you in the dark of the night. So when you encounter a chain link fence, climb. Immediately check for metal barbs and seek a soft spot for landing. Understand that dogs are lying in wait. Hungry dogs, stupid dogs, dogs that have been beaten and kicked, jowls swinging and dripping like ham hocks in a meat locker. These dogs are ticking off the seconds, watching as you work the tips of your boots into each silver diamond, sweat salty and thick beating a line on your forehead as you navigate the loops and whirls of wire which are poised to slice your palms. And still, the dogs wait to lap your blood. This is what it is like to live in this world. You will struggle to your feet, weary and panting, more times than you ever thought possible. And do not think you know what love is. I swear to you on my word, it will change 1,000 times. So if middle-aged white women wrote slam poetry, I think they would say, "It's rough out there. Be careful, sweet cheeks."
Yay.
Yay.
I love that one. I think mostly because, well, one, it does fairly well when you do perform it, but it kind of, it is you. Like,
It does feel, it was my first one.
was it? I thought it was Juicy.
No, this was my first.
Oh, wow.
And let me tell you a little story. Do we have a
Please.
moment?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I wrote this in a hotel room at Hotel Albuquerque. I did not have the money at all to do this, but there was some sort of big slam extravaganza way before I started writing. Mercedes was there, Damien, Albuquerque Unidos was in it. And so I went to this event and decided to just splurge on a room and stay there overnight and just treat it like a retreat and write. No offense to any of the slam community. And in fact, I love the slam community. They have been so helpful and so loving and kind to me. But what I did notice and still notice is someone like me is missing from the scene oftentimes, right?
Yeah.
I kind of felt like if I would have had, a father addicted to heroin and, also been a lesbian, something. I should have been more on the fringe, I guess, to really feel like I could have a voice and have something to say. So when I started writing, I felt kind of frustrated about that. And that's actually where this poem came from. That I thought, if a middle-aged white woman was down there, what would she be saying? And I also felt like maybe sometimes, someone like me now that I've got my shit together, I look more boring than, the story behind the scenes isn't always clear, right? And so I was trying to articulate that. So, yeah.
And yeah, no, you're so right. And it is weird being a little older and doing slam basically for the first time.
Yes.
I know there are some folks in town and all over that have been in slam since the beginning, so they are our age. But
Yes.
the folks who are currently, it tends to be a much younger crowd.
Yeah, younger and edgier somehow. I guess is what I'm trying to say. And
I've gathered that that's really an Albuquerque thing.
oh, really?
At least that's what a lot of other folks have said, is that Albuquerque has a very kind of unique, very less than Caucasian.
Yes.
I guess a lot of times when our slam teams go to nationals, we're basically the only less than white folks on the. But yeah.
Well, and on one hand, that makes sense because
it's what Albuquerque is.
It's representing Albuquerque, right? And yeah, just everyone in the slam community has been so encouraging to me from day one. When I walked out on stage and had no idea what I was doing, I was stumbling over my words and I wasn't confident at all. I remember them clapping the loudest and saying, "You got this, girl." And so, what I am trying to say here is I think everyone's voice is important. These people that happen to fit a certain demographic that usually does slam, they're important. But there are also these other people out there who, housewives somewhere or something, that probably have important things to say and important perspective. And we don't really hear that.
Yeah.
So.
And it's cool because Albuquerque has some of the most powerful slam poets. I mean, our teams have won constantly.
Yeah.
And so I can say that at least my growth, and I assume your growth as well, wouldn't have happened so quickly if we didn't when we were slamming and started slam, we were already up against Mercedes Holtry, Matthew Brown, Damian Flores, who have been doing this. Damian said next year it'll be half of his life.
Wow.
He'll have done this. And I thought he was my age, but he's actually much, much younger than I am.
Well, and so you're right. We do have an incredible richness here in Albuquerque, right? And I know, Rainey, that you and I experienced the same thing. We went out, we slammed a couple of times. We weren't that great. And they just brought us into the fold. Remember? They started inviting us to things. And so you're right. I don't think we would have felt the confidence and been able to grow as we did without them doing that.
It's a tough community here, but it's a very loving one.
Yeah,
so I'm very
absolutely.
happy about that. All right. Anything else you want to share before we get to our icebreakers?
No, I don't think so.
No?
I'm having a great time, though. Thank you.
I'm glad. So the icebreaker poem that we did this time is called a tanka poem. It's like a haiku. It's also Japanese. It's also syllable based. In traditional Japanese, it's one line, 31 syllables, but the English version tends to break it into 5 lines of 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5, 7, 7. So that was pretty much our only parameter, was the 31 syllables. So, Robin, do you want to go first or second?
I'll go first.
All right.
My real name cannot be pronounced in the English language. It is the high and clean sound of icy waters sliding over glaciers.
Nice. And I have to say that both of ours, it's the first, this is the 4th interview. All 3 of the other interviews have all done winter based.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it was probably because it was really cold and it was still daytime, so we could see out the window. Well, I could see out the window. Mm-hmm. None of you can ever see out the window. But yeah, this is the first time that both of us didn't do winter, which was nice. So mine is moon during the day, unsung but shining bright, hiding in daylight. Nobody mentions you once, like the illness in my chest.
Wow.
Excellent.
You managed to say a lot in that short little sucker.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
Thank you. I already told you that I kind of cheated and wrote that one a while ago when I first knew or learned about the Tonka poem, and it was actually the first time that I went out camping by myself. It just happened to be sitting in a chair, staring at the canyon wall, and noticing that, yeah, nobody ever talks about the moon during the daytime, and every single time, it always made me curious. When I was a kid, the first time I noticed it, I was like, oh my gosh, the moon is out, and it's daytime, and nobody... Like,
you're going to kill me. That's not what I got from that. I heard that. But what I really focused on was the sickness in your chest.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about this poem I have about cancer. And is that... What were
Yeah,
you?
no, you are absolutely right. That is, yeah, that's what it's about. Yeah, I guess that's not where my brain went first when I was talking about it. But I've always wondered why nobody talks about the moon during the daytime. But yeah, the other part was that, everybody in my father's side of the family died very young with all sorts of heart problems, and my brother and I are basically just rolling the dice.
Oh, yeah.
One of us are bound to have heart issues, and, it's not one of those in the type of heart problems that at least my grandmother, who I never met because she died when my father was 18, that sort of, I can't even remember what it's called, but there's no real test or fix for it. So it's just one of those, if it's your time to go, it's just going to happen. Oh, yeah. And I guess whatever it is, at least the way my dad explained it was she was dead before she even hit the floor, that it was just so instantaneous that, so, yeah.
Well, that does sound merciful in one way, right? My brother is, he has multiple myeloma, which is a form of cancer. Red blood cell cancer. And so I had a breast cancer scare, I guess maybe a year ago, and it did scare the crap out of me. And I started writing a poem, and it was mostly done. And then I just don't think I understood how cancer can drag itself out and just tear you apart. So that's really what he's doing right now. And it's, I'm sure, just miserable. It's hard to watch. It's got to be 1,000 times more miserable to live, right?
Yeah. And I have to admit, I don't know if you've read that one publicly, the one about...
the breast cancer one?
Yeah.
The only time that you've heard it, and you were very busy, and I do not expect you to catalog all of my poems, Rainey, even though you are my poetry partner, so there are high expectations. It was at your feature.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. You were probably just so
such
busy.
Terrible memory. But when I was prepping for this interview, I read through that one, and that one hit. And I was going to ask you to read it, but I'll leave that one for folks to get the book.
Sounds good.
That one's, this got a little bit more.
Is it in the book?
I think it's the last one. I'd rather not know.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, it's in there. So go ahead, get the book. Excellent. So thank you, Robin, so much for this.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
It was fun. Thank you.
Yes, and we'll revive more ink.
I want to thank my guest, Robin, again for coming on the show. You can find her short story collection, Cutting Your Losses, under her old name, Robin Kalanick. That's Kalinich. Or maybe by now you can actually find her under her current name, Robin Reynolds. You can also find a lot of her poetry in the Rumble Room Volume 1 on Amazon. That also has me, Zachary Kluckman, Anna Martinez, and a lot of our group pieces as well. If you like art, she's all over the internet. If you search for her name, or if you search for Ink and Alchemy, you'll find her all over the place. She's got thousands of followers, thousands of poets, and artists of all sorts engaging in that. So check that out as well. If you like the show, please hit the subscribe button on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts from, and leave a review. That's how we get more listeners. You can head over to Patreon and search for Pen and Poet if you want to support the show. You can give as little as $1 a month. And I hope I've given some fun things as gifts if you do participate in helping keep the show running. This is not a cheap endeavor. And I often say that I do this because I like to have poets read to me, and that is absolutely true. But in reality, it's also, and more importantly, it's about giving an outlet for artists to share their work and be heard. If you want to be a guest on the show, hit me up on my email at rainy.mullen@gmail.com. That's rene.mullen@gmail.com. Or you can find me on Twitter at @penandpoet. Thanks for listening, and stay safe.